porn affects your brain like a drug. In the same way that a drug addict is going to escalate their behavior, a porn addict, oftentimes over the course of the addiction, will escalate their behavior. So consuming porn actually leads you into a downward spiral, and there's 5 stages of porn addiction. Now, what are the stages of porn addiction, and why does it matter if we know them? Well, here's the deal. Once we recognize where we are caught up in this behavior, whether it's in the 2nd stage or the 4th stage or whatever, that can help us give us a glimpse not only into the past, but understand the roots of our behavior. Second, it's going to give us insight into the future, depending on where we are in these stages, where we may not have reached rock bottom yet, and this is what's coming next unless we get a handle on this behavior. See, if we can recognize where our behavior is leading us to in the future, then we can feel empowered to take the necessary steps, the action steps we need to take, and gain back control in our lives, to conquer, to transcend this addiction and go on to live the life that we know that we are born here to live. So in this video, we're going to walk through the 5 stages of porn addiction, giving you insight into every stage, how the stages lead into each other, and what you need to do if you've recognized you're in one of these stages. So here's stage 1. It's called exposure. Now, oftentimes, if it's going to lead to the other stages, this exposure happens at a very young age. I think the average age of exposure to porn these days is somewhere around 8 years old. And after having loads of conversations, collecting numerous data points, the vast majority of people that struggle with an unwanted addiction to porn were exposed to it at a very young age. Guys, we're talking like 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 1st grade, and sometimes even younger. Now, knowing you're exposed is important, right? Knowing that what you saw when you were a kid is actually leading you into some of these other stages is important, because you may need to spend some time processing and unpacking and healing some of the trauma that you experienced at a young age. You may not have called it trauma. You may have called it just a friend sharing a funny joke or a video or something like that, but it actually created something that started a chain reaction in your life. The other thing about this stage is you need to learn that it's okay to give yourself some grace. Like, if you're caught up in this, it may not be 100% your fault. That being said, it may not be 100% your fault, but what remains fundamentally true is that it still is 100% your responsibility to do something about it. It may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. It's your life you're living. Someone else doesn't get to live your life. That's why understanding the stage 1 is exposure, because it leads us into the 2nd stage of addiction, which is called habituation. If we were exposed at some point, these unwanted behaviors became a habit. And if I'm going to take responsibility for dealing with this in my life, I need to understand that at some point when the habit started, I need to recognize I was doing this as a result of this, but now I'm at this point, like I'm doing this, it's a habit. One of the first things you should do early on in the recovery process is really begin to audit your own journey, your own action steps, the last several times that you consumed porn. If this is a habit now, what were the series of events that led up to it? What's the pattern surrounding this habit? What are the triggering moments? What are the triggering states that you find yourself in? You're tired, you're anxious, you're stressed, lonely, and you may not identify that as lonely. It might be like you feel isolated, in need of connection. But what you've done now, if you're at this stage, is you've created habits that attempt to medicate internal feelings and emotional states. A habit now is so because you're trying to deal with something that's actually deeper below the surface. So once you have exposure, you begin to like the way that it makes you feel or something like that. You're not really maybe processing all of what's happening to you in the moment, but you begin to create habits around that in your life that help you consume it, and that leads us to the 3rd stage, which is addiction. Now, Dr. Anna Lemke in the book Dopamine Nation defines addiction as the use of substance or behavior, such as consuming porn, despite the negative consequences to self or others. The continued use of substance behavior despite the negative consequences to self or others. So has your habit with porn manifested itself in porn-induced erectile dysfunction? Has your habit with pornography been the thorn in your side in your relationship with your wife? Has it caused intimacy issues? Has it made you feel disconnected from people at work? Has it exhausted and maybe taken away your motivation in life? Like you're starting to notice that there are negative consequences in your life and you're still continuing the behavior. You're addicted. There's really negative side effects, and when we continue to return to the behavior despite the repeated experience of those side effects, that is the definition of addiction. Once we've recognized that this is where we're at, this is where we begin to have to take action, right? Because if we don't take action here, what's going to happen is it will lead us to stage 4. It naturally will progress to stage 4, which is the stage called escalation. And this is dangerous because you start to notice, like a drug addict at a certain point is not getting the same high that they used to, even though they have the exact same amount of dosage. So they have to up the dosage to get the same amount of high. It's because the neuroplasticity of our brain, the way that our brain changes, is it adapts to an increasing amount of the substance hitting our brain. Okay, and so in order to feel the same amount of high, we have to get more and more or take more extreme actions. And this is the same thing is true with porn addiction. At this stage, porn addiction escalates into other sexual behaviors. So consuming free porn escalates into buying an OnlyFans membership. OnlyFans memberships escalate into attending strip clubs or massage parlors. Strip clubs and massage parlors escalate into buying escorts or prostitutes, which escalates even further sometimes into buying sex from sex traffickers. Like, this is an escalation model that has repeated itself time and time and time again. So many people, especially ones who are now in prison, when asked about what happened early on in their life and how they ended up at this point, they say, man, it started at an early age, just exposure. You know, I wasn't consuming this hardcore stuff. I wasn't doing these extreme actions. Every single one of them says it. And now it's progressed it to some point in some extreme escalation. So they went through the stages. They started with exposure, then they progressed to habituation, and eventually it became an addiction. And now, without dealing with the addiction, they're at the point where it's now escalated to behaviors that they never thought that they would get to. They're far beyond just sitting in front of a screen and consuming pornography. Almost all of these people will tell you that they are at or close to stage 5. And this is where it's dangerous, because this is the stage of destruction. This stage sees the destruction of the life that is in front of us, the destruction of the relationships that we have, the destruction of our moral code where we make decisions, the destructions of our soul, the destruction of our being, the destruction of everything that we thought we were put on earth to accomplish. This is the stage of destruction. And here's a sobering truth. Once you've been labeled as a sex offender, that goes with you everywhere you go in life. It impacts where you can live. It impacts where you can work. It impacts where you can serve. I mean, it changes your life. This final stage of destruction, you know, it's like when your wife presents you with divorce papers, and it's the destruction of your marriage. When you get caught up at work consuming pornography for the 5th time and you're handed that pink slip, right? It's the destruction of your career. When you choose porn over, you know, the networking party or the party you got invited to, that's the destruction of your social life. And this is where it leads. Exposure leads to habituation. Habituation leads to addiction. Addiction leads to escalation. And escalation, if you don't get control of it, it will control you and lead to destruction. Now, here's the good news. If you're somewhere between stages 1 to 4 and you're watching this, you probably recognize that you need to take some serious action. You are finally ready to end this addiction once and for all. If that's you, I want to invite you to check out our new recovery program. It's called Revive Your Life, where we help you gain shameless confidence and create a fulfilling porn-free life. One not only where you're just free of porn, but you are creating a life that no longer needs it anymore because it's so fulfilling. Now, there's an investment that you'll need to make for sure. There's an investment that's needed for getting control of your life and becoming the kind of person that you were put here to be. Because when you pay attention. So if you're ready to gain shameless confidence and create a fulfilling life that doesn't need porn anymore, head to reviveyourlife.net and schedule a discovery call today.